Welcome Sean Foley to our DMT podcast, director of Dr. Strangelove, playing at the Noel Coward Theatre to the end of this month. Sean is an actor, writer and director, a double Olivier Award winner and Tony nominee, and he uniquely has been nominated in the acting, writing and directing categories. Welcome to the podcast, Sean Foley.
Well, thank you very much for having me, is all I can say. And what a brilliant introduction that was. I don't know who wrote it, but
I'm sure we'll come on to that. I mean, the show's been a huge success, Sean. Congratulations for that.
Thank you very much. It was, as usual, a big collaborative effort.
Well, yeah, and hopefully, we'll come on to that. I mean, our listeners like to hear the stories from behind the scenes, what you might share. Well, we'll come back to that. We'll give you a moment to think about it. Maybe something from the play, what I wrote. That wasn't last week, but...
It wasn't, but still very vivid in my mind.
I'll bet it is. But, I mean, you've directed Dr. Strangelove. It really is an extraordinarily kind of volatile time for the world. Do you think it has moved away from the original satire to it's in a space that's actually closer to reality?
Well, that's a tough question to start with.
We've done the niceties. We're right in there.
Oh, God, you're right in there, aren't you? So I would say, no, I think it is still satire, but, what can I say? One of the great things about doing a show like that is, one, obviously you're working from incredible source material that absolutely works and definitely speaks to our time. Armando and I, doing the adaptation together, had a joke that, as we got into the beginning of last year, and the world seemed to be worsening in so many ways, we just kept saying, yeah, the worse the world gets, the better it is for the play. And there's the silver lining, showbiz succeeds. No, it's because it is about, it's famously a comedy about the end of the world. Kubrick himself called it a nightmare comedy.
Yeah, Stanley Kubrick, based on that film from 1966.
Earlier, 63.
63.
Yeah.
And when you think of how long ago that was to now, the resonance of it.
Exactly. Well, the threats don't go away. I mean, in a way, I think people more less in the 70s, but certainly maybe 80s, 90s and noughties until fairly recently have sort of, particularly in the West, have sort of gone, we stopped thinking about the nuclear bomb, as it were, or the end of the world and coming that way. But sadly, the end of the world can come in many ways. We're in the midst of climate catastrophe, climate change. It's not that the show is about those things, but they're in the air. So in the air is the sort of disturbance and anxiety of, the world we live in. But who wants to see a show about that? And that's why comedy exists.
Yes.
It genuinely is why comedy exists, and genuinely is why comedy is, I think, the best way to look at so many of the difficult issues, either personally or collectively, that we have,
Yeah, and there's definitely the British irony element to it that, in more literal countries, in terms of their humor, they wouldn't see it as funny.
Maybe not. I mean, incredibly, you say that. I mean, there were a few of our dear fraternity in the critical community who sort of slightly made that point, sort of going, well, why are these people allowed to make jokes about the end of the world? I mean, what a nonsense. What a complete nonsense.
It's not getting it, isn't it? It's just
not. Well, let's do away with comedy.
Yeah.
In fact, let's ban it. Well, it's too disturbing. I can't, because what it is asking you to hold several positions at the same time, usually comedy. And why people laugh is they immediately recognize, the balloon being punctured of something. And that's why people laugh. And why can't you do that about the most serious subjects? In fact, there's an old saying, of course, that the two most fit subjects for comedy are sex and death. And they're the two really, really big ones. They're the two biggest taboos. And that's why they're the most fit subjects for comedy.
And it must be said at this point, having seen it, it's fantastically funny. It is a hit. It's been so well received by the public. It's extraordinary, really, when you in this moment when I'm talking to you about it's about, death and the end of the world, and you think, oh God, oh God. But actually, as you say, being able to tackle it through comedy is such a brilliant device.
It is. And of course, that's not one that Armando and I came up with in this instance, but it's the stock in trade of comedy. I've always basically, unless somebody wants to offer me a job in a drama, which I'd love because I think they're much easier to do, but that's just my opinion, is that, comedy releases some, I mean, the people on stage or a good comedy releases something in the audience that they need. They need the allowance of laughing, being together and laughing at all these things, So so it was obviously an honour to work on, given that it's the very first time that the Kubrick estate has allowed any sort of adaptation at all of any of his work.
Yeah.
It was a kind of no pressure kind of situation, but
And working with Armando Iannucci, I mean, obviously he's famous for, amongst others, The Thick of It and Veep. How does that process work when it's a co-adaptation? Do you take chunks each, or do you chat about it and it all comes out?
Yeah, we've done it in lots of different ways. When I used to be sort of essentially in a double actor, we were a fringe theatre company that then became successful with a show. Successful in the West End, I should say, with a show that called The Play What I Wrote. But Hamish and I used to write sort of collectively in a different way, a completely different way. We used to basically semi-improvise scenes and then write them down, and sometimes come with dialogue and jokes prepared, but kind of really use a lot of improvisation and what people call devising, so to build the scenes together. But having sort of created the structure of the show first, then we'd write sort of into it. Here was different, completely different process, partly because you did have a script to go from. It was a film script, so that's not going to work on stage. So there's a lot of talking at first, just chatting about how we could do it. And then once we felt we got into, Armando and I, once we felt we got into a sort of good place about how we were going to adapt it, what's the first thing you see on stage? What's the second thing you see on stage? What's the, that was partly me also with my directorial head on, sort of imagining what the audience would be going through. Once we'd sort of got that, again, the layout of the show, then we divided it up, basically. So, okay, you do that scene, I'll do that
Literally,
scene.
you did.
And then we literally, it was almost like we did it separately sort of thing, but then almost like sort of passing your homework across the table.
To be marked.
Then he'd mark my scene, basically not mark it, but, adjust it, come up with different stuff on top of it. And I did the same to his scene. So we sort of, in that way, it was a conversation and collaboration, in that manner. And then we'd constantly meet up anyway and have the same process again and sort of go, oh, well, it's still not really working, this scene, or what do we need here? Or, and it was really fun.
And you're still talking.
Oh, yeah, really fun. Partly why it was really fun is that actually I've known Armando for a very, very long time, but we'd never, ever worked together. And so when I was asked by the producers, to brilliant, youngish, I would say, producers, Patrick Miles and David Luff, if I wanted to adapt and direct it, I said, well, that is great. Thank you very much. But I would like to co-adapt it because I don't want all the blame. Because you could guess there would be a certain amount of stuff coming down the track towards you. Go, how dare you do?
Yeah, I mean, I cannot imagine what dealing with the estate would be like, the Stanley Kubrick estate. Was that very pressured, or was that one meeting and they laid it out and that was it? Or did they keep coming back? And
they've moved in here at my house and they're still...
moved in.
They still want to know what I'm doing every day. They were absolutely brilliant. Actually, I think the main part of the work was done by Patrick and David as producers in getting them to sort of agree to it. And then after that, I think once they'd taken that decision, they felt comfortable with the people who were doing it, and so kind of let us get on with it. I mean, of course, if we'd come up with something they hated, it would have stopped. So we did the whole of the first draft and then had to send it off to them. And then there was a kind of 2-week gap where, of course, you're totally convinced that they hate it and hate you and have hired a hitman, and all that. But then it came back that they actually really enjoyed it, thought it was a great adaptation, and it was sort of chocks away. Then we went.
I mean, looking back at the run, it has been such a success. Is there anything you would change now? Is that something you would ever do?
I think there's always something, particularly if you're involved in the writing of something, and absolutely the directing of something, but particularly the writing of something, there's always things, there's always a sense of, at a certain point, which is usually 2 or 3 nights before opening night, you have to say that it's finished. You can't, I don't think anyway, some people do it, but particularly in comedy, there's so much to do with rhythm that you need to give the actors the opportunity to play it, I would say at least 3 times in a row with the same script. So, before loads of people see it, but loads of people had seen it in preview and were kept loving it anyway. So we were in a good place. It wasn't not like we were trying to sort of put a Frankenstein's dummy back together. It had worked from the first preview. We were just improving it. So it's but yeah, in some sense, you do have to just tell yourself to abandon it. That's it. That's what it is now.
The baby's been born.
Yeah, and you go. If you're lucky enough to get another chance at it, if this play has another life or whatever, I'm sure we'd do things, to change the odd line, maybe finish a scene in a slightly different way. One thought for sure, it is partly linked to how brilliantly Steve Coogan does it, but audiences love the character of Dr. Strangelove.
Yes.
And we use him very, very sparingly, as the film does actually, throughout the evening. But one thought is that maybe we could do with a little bit more of him, because there's something so magnetically powerful about a Nazi. Sorry to say.
Yeah.
It's that thing of the devil has all the best tunes. And of course, he was famously based on a real life character, because of course, all the German Nazi scientists got hoovered up by America and everywhere else and went to work for them.
Yeah. That's astonishing to think, but that was factual. That was what happened.
It was factual. And the very first thing you see on the stage was actually a bit of projection, but in the film, it's there in the film as well, outside USAF Burpelson, is the line, "Peace is our profession." And Kubrick wrote that in the original script because that was real too.
Yes. Yeah.
The army did actually say, "Peace is our profession."
Right.
You can imagine, there is no satire after that point.
Yeah. I don't know where you go with that.
Well, peace is your profession. I'm sorry. There was me thinking it was war.
Those guns and the tanks and the, yeah. Steve plays, how many, is there one more character?
Yeah, so Steve plays 4 characters in the show. Dr. Strangelove, the title character. He plays President Merkin Muffley, who's the US president in it. He plays Group Captain Lionel Mandrake, who's the British officer at USAF Burpelson. And he plays Colonel Kong, who is in command of a B-52 bomber, the bomber that sort of goes rogue and then finally drops the bomb. And partly, I think, why, or part of our little scheme when we approached Steve to do the part, is that actually those were the 4 parts offered to Peter Sellers in the film. And he said he wouldn't do Kong. He didn't want to do Kong. He didn't. Right. He had time to get the accent right, or whatever he came up with. In fact, he started to do Kong and then hurt his ankle, and then he said, I don't want to do it. And so he didn't. So he ended up doing 3 characters in the film. And we said to Steve, well, you see, you could be one better Sellers.
That's a director's ploy of a little fun.
Imagine this.
Mr. Actor.
Imagine this. People hail you as the best actor ever.
I have to tell you, I went to see the show with somebody when they came on at the end. He said, "Where is the guy from the aeroplane?" I said, "That was Steve Coogan as well." He couldn't actually believe that he had played all those parts. He said, "My God."
Yeah.
But he said he was off, and he was trying to work it out. I think, but he was there. And how did he get back on so quickly? I mean, some of those changes in the choreography of that is fantastic.
Oh, great! Thank you very much. Yeah, we worked very hard on that, and in fact, that was one of the first things I thought. Literally, in the next split second after being asked to do it, I thought, well, this could be great on stage because you've got one actor playing all those parts, but live in front of your eyes.
Yes.
Because no matter how brilliant Sellers was in the film, some part of your brain knows damn well that Kubrick shouts cuts and he goes off and he changes his costume and he becomes the other character and he gets a bit of time off and he thinks this and he thinks that and has a meal and whatever. Or he comes back next week and shoots all one character, you know. But to see it live on stage in front of your eyes with essentially Steve, you know, metamorphizing between these, and that's astonishing. That's brilliant. What a compliment to Steve and to the show as well. To have people, and I'm assuming, Billy, if they're with you, a sophisticated type of person.
I wouldn't go that far, sure.
Sort of being basically hoodwinked.
I must say, I did love it. And he definitely, he seems to be enjoying it, Steve. You get that feeling that it's a bloody hard graft, but he's actually really enjoying it.
Yeah. And I think partly that surprised him. I think what you get with someone like Steve, I mean, all actors are the same in one sense, is that they're unique and solo kind of individuals, you know, but the nature of what most of Steve's work has been is Steve Coogan, you know, himself, and he does his comic characters, and of course he makes his shows and he works with other people. I'm not saying that, but to be in a company, work in a company and be a lead actor in a company is very different. And that's where, as tough as it is, that's where theatre can be great, you know, to work in. Because nowhere else, I think, do you get such a sense of, well, I mean, you literally have to turn up at the same time with everybody and do it together. And film people get it. You know, obviously there's lots of people who work across those mediums, but again, there's lots of film and TV people who sort of don't get it, don't quite understand. Well, why would you do it? You know, I mean, you don't get paid very well, and there's no explanation. People who love theatre. There's sort of magic to it, and you either like that or you don't. You know.
I think there's definitely the word vocational comes into mind to me when it comes to theatre, because people can go to university and do accounting. They can go to university to do law. They can now go to university to do acting. But if it's not in your soul, you can tell immediately when you meet people if they are of the theatre. And I know that can sound ridiculous, but I don't think it's something you can learn. I think it has to be within you.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe that's exactly right. You can. I certainly agree that people who work in the theatre, particularly, you know, if you can stay the course in any way, because there's lots of ups and downs. So you got to love it. I mean, you genuinely have to, on some, or love hate, you know, whatever the relationship is, there's got to be this sort of, because it's such a powerful thing. And that's why I still in it.
Yeah.
is that I'm sort of obsessed with the idea of sort of making people laugh, collectively laugh for the evening. And how do you do that? How can we calibrate it in such a way that they're going to go out floating on air, you know? And that for me is catharsis. I mean, a lot of which is a big word, it's a Greek word, but it, you know, there's a lot of people attach the idea of catharsis to an incredible tragedy and, you know, the drama and everything. I've rarely seen that, and I've honestly rarely seen that in an audience. But I have seen an audience piss themselves laughing to the point at which they just genuinely are in the moment with the play, with the actors, and that is catharsis. You are one with the moment in the theatre.
and you've achieved then. I didn't, you went up on stage for the first preview to just introduce it to the public. This is the first time we've done it, blah, blah, blah. And you came back and stood at the back of the auditorium. And when the curtain went up, there was laughter almost immediately. That must give you some kind of wonderful feeling, I think, when you know you've created that.
Yes, it does. It does. Absolutely.
I'm sure there's relief as well, but...
Well, it's mixed. It's certainly on first nights, it's mixed with relief. Partly because, and it happens every single time, is that the very, very worst moment is longer than a moment, but the very, very worst time of making a comedy for the theatre is the last dress rehearsal. And I can tell you, the dress rehearsal we did before the first preview of Dr. Strangelove was dire. I mean, I was looking at it going, well, I've not only ruined my career, but I've ruined the career of many other very good professionals. And that's where the magic is, and also the magic of comedy, because of course you can't do comedy to an empty house.
There has to be an audience, yeah.
There'll be the audience, and they're the other component. And as soon as you put the other component with it, you go, oh, actually, I was right. We were right. It does work.
Yeah. Now, we're careening towards the end of our time, and I just wanted to ask about terms of, going forward, mountains to climb. I could do all the analogies, but just in terms of what you're doing next, I saw that, is it May this year, you're going to be doing With Neil and I?
That was last year. We've created it.
It was last year. That's why I'm hesitating. With ATG,
and we're just waiting to hear about that. Well, basically, as you know, Billy, that the planes circling Heathrow analogy, there's a lot of plays that want to get into town and not enough theatres. So we're waiting for our runway.
Waiting for your runway. Well, in terms of the specific reference to your career, what advice could you give to aspiring directors? Become an air traffic controller?
Well, that's one way of doing it. I mean, so I was really, in the Fringe, started a Fringe theatre company, and I would say exactly the same thing then. Who was I to start a Fringe theatre company with a bunch of people who'd never made a show before? We just did it. Then we made these shows. Some of them, certainly some parts of them were awful, but we got better and better at it just because we worked at it. And then, had some success, and then some commercial success. And then I was lucky enough to be asked to be a director. I've never been a director before. As a director, I think I'm probably, because I've written and still write, I've acted and still act very occasionally. And because I started in the Fringe, done everything and put the lights up and all. So I'm can vaguely understand still most people's jobs, which I think is a help. And, because your job is to help them be good. A lot of people think it's about ordering people around. I think it's about helping other people be good while having the overall vision and going, we're going over here, guys. Come on, everyone, over here. I know it doesn't look very good. I know we're walking through a bog at the moment. I know we're going up a very steep incline, but I promise you, if we go over here, we'll get it right. So I would say you just got to, and it happens still all the time, because you have to tell yourself, well, you just got to keep believing, and that's it, and start work. It's really important also to find people who you can creatively connect to. And then have a go, because it's only by having a go. What's the old thing? Footballing and basketballing. That you can't score if you don't shoot.
And there we are, ending on a sports note. I love that.
Very good.
Thank you very, very much, Sean Foley, director of Dr. Strangelove, and all our podcasts can be accessed via the Delfont Mackintosh website. So thank you, Sean, very much, and all the best.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.